Welcome to another episode of the Market Makers in Middle East and Africa podcast. I am your host Abrar Hussain. Today I speak to a special guest, Jimmy Haoula, managing partner at BSA Ahmad bin Hezeem and Associates. Welcome to the podcast, Jimmy.
Thank you, Abrar. Thank you for having me.
Jimmy, I spoke to CEOs, CEOs, and it's first time I'm talking to a lawyer and a successful one. It's great to have you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Tell us about your story.
I'm one of those few who was born in Dubai, the United Arab Emirates, and I've lived all my life here. Went away for graduate and postgraduate degrees in law, got my qualifications, and came back and started practicing. Best place to practice, in my opinion, law, because it's ever evolving. What is valid today, if it doesn't work, it'll be changed tomorrow to make it work. The beauty of living in the United Arab Emirates. I've started my career off with a magic circle firm. A few years into that experience, a group of colleagues of mine and I just decided to spin off and set something that is UAE based. And thankfully, it has now grown into the region, into the Sultanate of Oman, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Lebanon, and elsewhere.
Perfect. As you mentioned, BSA Ahmad bin Hezeem and Associates, large firm now, I think 150 lawyers, different countries. Tell us what exactly you do, what practices you touch, where all you can help the corporates.
The law firm as a whole provides the entire spectrum of legal services. Whether you have a labor matter, a labor contract, an M&A or a arbitration for a couple of $1 billion, the firm provides for that sector or that segment of legal services. We do provide family law support, but for corporates only. We don't do family disputes or otherwise. As a law firm for corporates around the world and in the UAE, where we help in making sure that when they step into the market, they are safe and sound and compliant. And the last one is far more important nowadays than the first two. Be compliant so that you can be safe and sound.
Perfect. Now, as you mentioned that it's based here, headquartered here, and for the region, how do you see the business landscape specifically in this period of the year or in this time where there is a lot of dynamism in UAE, in KSA, across the region? So how do you see and where do you see there are a lot of opportunities and you see a lot of growth for companies?
The plans that have been set out by the regional governments, including the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, also the Sultanate of Oman, and others, are long-term. And they are able to do such plans on long-term basis because they have a stable economy and a stable political position. In my opinion, we live in the best part of the world. Currently in the United Arab Emirates, we have seen a beautiful progress over the last 52 years, out of which I have experienced most of it here. We see a lot of further expansion and requirements to on-ground, physical, in the UAE businesses, industries, driving away from the classical stigma that the world has on the region that it's only oil and gas related, oil and gas related. Yes, we are oil and gas related, but we're not only oil and gas related. You'll be surprised by the amount of investments that have poured into the United Arab Emirates, specifically in the last 2 years, COVID, post-COVID today, in relation to heavy-duty industries other than oil and gas, hospitality, technology, so on and so forth. We by far have the best healthcare facilities in the region, developed over the last decade or so. Our schoolings have improved immensely because, again, a lot of investments have come into these industries, specifically being education, healthcare, and others. And this is not a small growth or a directed growth to specific areas. So it's not like it's Dubai or Abu Dhabi only. This is the entire country. The ideas that the country have spread out here is for the entire country, all throughout, all the 7 Emirates. And the same thing in Saudi Arabia. Recently, I was visiting our offices in Riyadh, and then they insisted that I take a trip to other cities in Saudi Arabia. And the plan as posted in KSA is obviously for the entire country. It's not specific. And where would investors go in today? The grass is green, whether it be in the UAE or in Saudi Arabia. It's really what you know what to do. If it's only a matter of pumping in money, then there are various and plenty and ample opportunities in both jurisdictions, including in the Sultanate of Oman as well, where you can go in and generate a healthy IRR in reputed industries that are non-oil and gas related.
Mm-hmm. And coming to, you mentioned a very good point on IRR. What kind of IRR companies kind of target when they come to the region, or what kind of IRR they can get in UAE KSA?
It really depends on the industries that they want to focus on. But you're looking at anything in the range of 7 to 20%, depending on the industry. The real estate may be, that's actually that's incorrect. Real estate is also having a high IRR. It just depends on where on the spectrum of the market you are.
Yeah.
But that is also quite a high IRR in the United Arab Emirates and now also in Saudi Arabia. So we're looking at anything north of 7%, and worldwide that is not common and doesn't exist. And you'll be surprised, people would the minute you start saying these numbers, people will think you're either out of your mind or there's something wrong. No, there isn't. This is how the market here is. It's healthy, it's rich, and it's bold. Mm-hmm. You come, you provide the industry or the service you want, and you will earn on that.
Mm-hmm. Jimmy, once, IRR is great, right? So one of the things that investor will see, okay, we can get a good IRR. Then they see, is it a stable environment? I think you mentioned that it's a very stable environment, stable governments, and I would say it's the best place now in the whole kind of world
Absolutely.
to be here. What other areas you see which makes it quite lucrative for investing in the region or growing in the region?
I think the most commonly spoken about topic today that makes us extremely attractive to FDI is our strong compliance and regulatory regimes that have been imposed by the UAE government and recently as well by the KSA government in various sectors and industries. Earlier, you would find a lot of FDI restrictive in investing in this region because it's either we are in some form of list that they don't like, or they believe that we do things differently than they do, which is true. We do things differently than they do, but that doesn't mean we do it wrongly. We just, the cultures are different and hence things are done differently. But given the recent developments in compliance and regulatory regimes all around the world, and specifically in the region here, a lot of industries have shaped up to look and to act in line with best international practices that ironically don't exist in the West world or in some of the West world, which makes us really prime for investors to come in and use our platforms, our legislation, our country to develop us and their businesses.
Mm-hmm. If, as you mentioned, now regulations are favorable and it attracts FDIs, if you want to touch 2 or 3 industries where you can talk about the regulations, maybe banking, real estate, or any other one, which are those, and what trends do you see in those industries on the regulation and compliance side, and how it has improved?
I'll split the answer on that, if you don't mind, to 2. I'll tell you that there has been material development, obviously, in our banking, insurance industries here. Real estate, needless to say, is a prime one in the United Arab Emirates. But on the second hand as well, I'd like to emphasize that because we are pushing the world to come and see us, not only as a consuming state, but also as a manufacturing state, we're pushing industries. And industries create a lot of opportunities, a lot of labor, a lot of employments, and so on and so forth. So in relation to the first one, I think the recent regulations that have been implemented by the governments, most recently a brand new legislation that overtakes the complete insurance regime we had in the United Arab Emirates, which creates clear transparency, which makes the companies more regulated, more reporting, and obviously more compliant with international standards to make sure that their funding is appropriate, their leverages are appropriate, and that their mistakes, if any, are transparent and being rectified as and when happens. We did have that before, but it was in multiple various legislations. And obviously, with the development of the anti-money laundering requirements, obviously the government saw best correctly to combine all these legislations, improve them, and empower the regulator to make sure everybody's doing what they have to do. The same thing with the banking industry. Yes, it's tedious to open a bank account, but if your papers are in order, it's not. It's quite a straightforward process. Just make sure your papers are in order. That's for your safety and for the economic safety. The country's economy cannot suffer as a result of one individual suffering. But as a whole, if you were to read the regulations and comply with the regulations, they're not that difficult. You just need to know what you are doing. That's as far as the banking industry and the insurance industry are concerned. When it comes to the real estate market has been booming for the last few years. I frankly cannot see it. I'm not an expert in economics, but I cannot see it calm down. If anything, as a law firm, we're quite busy and active in various new projects in the UAE, in the Sultanate of Oman, and in KSA. And these projects are there because there seems to be a very aggressive demand locally and internationally. And they have made things much easier in this part of the world. You now need all you need to do is connect online, and you can do everything online. You can appoint a broker, you can complete your KYCs and get verified, you can purchase a property, you can sell a property, and you don't have to touch a person. That is quite impressive, especially in this regulatory environment where we are, that you need to make sure all your papers are in order, you know what you're doing, you're complying with the UAE central bank requirements and regulations for money sourcing and money fundings and so on and so forth. That's on the one side. On the manufacturing, the incentives that the governments in this region have given to people willing to come into the UAE or KSA or Sultanate of Oman and invest in developing their manufacturing plants here are immense. Abu Dhabi, for example, would give you a certain waiver on your energy bills, depending on the industry you want to invest in. In the UAE, that they would waive some of the government fees and some of the requirements of the authorities, depending again on the industry you want to be in. So yes, we are also pushing on that front. The regulatory requirement applies cross-board or legal services, but with these manufacturing incentives or this industrial incentives that the governments are giving, they're creating a better ecosystem for everybody, and they're creating a stronger and healthier economy.
Mm-hmm. I mean, thank you. That's a very, very good answer. So now let's say when a company wants to come in the region, right? A large conglomerate wants to build or put up a factory here. This is where, they need help. And this is where, you come in, where you can help them to make sure that they are compliant to the regulation, and you can guide them on the regulation. So is this the, normally they should take your help when they want to invest?
I think, I don't like to make the analogy that we're like doctors. We need to handhold the investor at least at the prime, during the prime process. Depending on the industry, industrialist or a manufacturing company would like to enter into the region with, it's important that they understand what the requirements and the regulations behind this. And here we're not only talking about compliance regulations or AML regulations, but we're talking about compliance with the culture, with the requirements of the particular state, whether it be a state within the United Arab Emirates or an emirate within the United Arab Emirates, or a city within the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, or a city in the Sultanate of Oman. They need to understand this. And irrespective of who they are and irrespective of what is available online, you still need someone to tell you what it is. It's up to you what to do with it, but you need someone to tell you what it is and how best to achieve it. Because you'll be surprised, a lot of the international organizations, once they find out, they change their minds. Rightfully so. They change their minds not into coming or penetrating the market. To the contrary, but they change their minds into how they want to do it or what they want to do it. And they alter that in line with what they find out. It is important right at the beginning that you know what you want to do and you seek confirmation as to its possible execution of that in the region you want to be in.
So, Jimmy, the region is growing, and you mentioned the regulations are very favorable and it's good for investments. You mentioned something on the culture part. So what do you mean by culture? That when a company from US or Europe or maybe Asia Pac, they want to come, what are some of the cultural nuances that they should be kind of careful or they should take care?
We're talking about the corporate culture here. We're not talking about the individual cultures. It's very common, and you'll be surprised how we would have clients come and tell us how we should be doing things in the United Arab Emirates. And our response to them is, yes, of course we can do that, but you are aware that that's not how things are done here. And in their minds, because of their culture, that there's no other way to do this except that way. And a few clients insist, despite the fact that they're paying us professional fees to advise them. And then once they get stuck, they come back to us and they're like, well, now we hear what you got to say, how do we do this? So they end up spending twice as much. But as in any jurisdiction, each jurisdiction has its ins and outs and has its ways. It has its authorities, it has its requirements, it has its submissions. The same thing in the United Arab Emirates. You cannot expect me to have the same drink in the UAE at the same flavor in the USA. It may be the same brand, the same manufacturer, but the sugar is different, the water is different, whatever it is, it's different. So it's the same thing here. So everyone has to accept the culture of the jurisdiction that they are entering in.
Yeah, and I think one thing I have noticed is, Jimmy, there's a lot of focus or importance given to relationship building, trust. I think that plays a very important role as well, apart from the IRR or, the investment potential.
And that's absolutely important. Knowing people is always healthy. And, there could be no disadvantage in meeting a person or knowing a person. And cultivating a relationship for the future of your persona or your business goes without saying in any industry, in any jurisdiction, in my opinion. And more specifically here, because we are in a jurisdiction that likes to live. We are in jurisdictions that likes to know people. We are in a jurisdiction that like to socialize with people. I'm sure a lot of jurisdictions are like us, but we're at our prime. And we like to do this. So you're welcome to come and cultivate your relationship.
Perfect. Now, Jimmy, coming to M&As, there has been a growth in M&As. If you can share some numbers and how the M&As are affecting the economic landscape in all the countries where you operate.
M&As is a very broad acronym. Until very recently, it was only A's in the United Arab Emirates and in the region. And recently, with the change of law in 2017, the United Arab Emirates, and even more recent in KSA, it had become M&A. The UAE specifically, if I may speak about it, until recently, and remains today, but then we also have other improving jurisdictions. We remain to be the hub of the MENA region for mergers and acquisitions. In what sense? We may not be the acquirers or the merger parties. We may not be even the investors, but you will find an element in the UAE, whether it be the advisors, whether it be the community where the senior C-level lives or occupies. And we are definitely a jurisdiction where whatever you're acquiring in the region has some involvement in the UAE directly or indirectly. Now, to give you some numbers, I cannot say this is public information, but since I recall in the late 1990s, mergers and acquisitions have created the largest source of FDI into the country. Obviously, non-oil and gas until recently. And that has been since I can recall. And why? It's because in the earlier days, it was much easier to hit the ground running than to start your own thing. And that is by acquiring smaller businesses, so on and so forth. There were certain industries that were restricted. When this thing opened up, you would also notice a spike in the M&As because certain, whether it be retail or otherwise, that has opened up, has brought even further FDI, created better joint ventures. This is a sort of an M&A between international organization and a local organization. They combined hands to develop.
Now, Jimmy, coming to the bankruptcy laws. Now, we have seen some updates, which I read, I'm not a professional, but that there has been significant improvements on the bankruptcy laws and the liabilities on entrepreneurs or the owners has reduced a bit. Tell us more about it. What does the new regulation means?
Yes, there has been some amendments or update to the regulations. Although the law is approximately now around 5 or 6 years old, it's still at its infancy. And I repeat, one of the beauties of this country is if something is not working to its ultimate position, then we will amend it or change it to make sure that it reflects best practices here. And yes, they have amended it to give a little bit more clarity as to what the liabilities and responsibilities of the shareholders and the directors of a applicant for bankruptcy are or would be. Did they reduce the liabilities or did they reduce the percentage? The answer is no. What they did is they made it more clear as to what you would be responsible for. And that's good for everyone because once you, this is a practice that every organization should take from the day they start. They need to know where they stand, where their financials are, where their liabilities are, and they must have a threshold, which is now clearly outlined in the law, where they need to alert certain parties, whether it be the shareholders, and a second threshold where they must alert the authorities. And as long as they comply with these processes, then they're going to be safeguarded because at the end of the day, unless they have done something that is criminal, no one can go after them. But then again, they need to understand what the organization is and where it is, both financially and in liabilities, and create that threshold. They need to come up with their own plans as to when to exercise these.
Jimmy, now virtual assets has been kind of from last many years, it's a big hype, and there are a lot of investors who are coming to the region, starting companies. Then you have on the consumer side who are trading, or investor side and buying and selling those assets. What's the regulation regarding the virtual assets? And is it a great place to start virtual asset business or start a firm on the crypto side?
We have been permitted in the United Arab Emirates and the region to, as consumers, to acquire cryptocurrency all around the world, as long as you are not trading it until recently here in the United Arab Emirates. And recently, in the last couple of years, obviously, we have a couple of authorities in the United Arab Emirates